So this is a story about my 5th grade self. But before I tell you all about that version of me, I would like to introduce you to me in the present. To put it incredibly lightly, I am a pretty non-confrontational person. A couple years ago, I was walking up Yonge Street, and someone tried to steal my iPod off of me. And 2 weeks ago, I actually got hit by a car. And somehow, in both situations, I managed to apologize. I don't stand up for myself very well, and I'm pretty cool with authority, and I just don't get mad all that often. I guess that's just the way I am, and I don't really mind being that person. But this story is about a much more rascally version of myself. So it's the summer of 2002, and my cousin Greg from Poland is staying with my family for the summer. Greg's a year older than me. He's 12, I'm 11. And my mom decided to invite my aunt and my cousin over to come stay with us for the summer and come check out Canada for a bit. And my mom and aunt think that this is like an especially good idea since Greg and I are so close in age. So like, despite the fact that we've never met until this very moment in time, we're gonna get along great and just be like best buds all summer long. But as life would have it, they could not have been more wrong if they tried. For some reason, I hated my cousin Greg. I just despised him, and I don't even have a good reason, and I'm standing in front of you all, and I wish I had like a good defense. Like, I totally saw him kick a box of kittens one time, or like, he doesn't think The Golden Girls is an amazing show. But no, I didn't have any good reasons. I was just this tiny little asshole that hated my cousin's guts. So it's June, and we're on our way back home from the pool. My mom's driving, and my aunt is in the front passenger seat, and my brother is in the back, along with myself and my arch nemesis. And because I hate every single molecule in Greg's existence, every time the car makes a turn, I take my chubby little elbow and I like lean in super hard and I like dig it into his side. And it's like probably not even hurting him that much because I had the strength of an earthworm. But it's probably super annoying. And eventually he calls me out on it and he tells my mom and my aunt. And my mom, who's been dealing with situations very similar to this one for the past couple weeks, is just done with it. And my mom's about like 5'1" in heels. She knows every single word to all the ABBA songs, and her favorite food are those like crunchy little Cheetos. And she came to Canada from Poland in the 80s, not knowing a word of English and with like $300 in her pocket. And I know that's like your typical immigrant story, but if you were to ask me if I would rather like go to a foreign country without knowing the language and like had to figure out everything out on my own, or if I'd rather, you know, like get my arm chopped off, I would be like, left, right, you choose, go right ahead. So she's kind of like this tiny little badass for me. She's the kind of mom that will like stock her fridge with your favorite snacks when you come home. And she's this really great person in my life. And I think part of the reason I hated Greg so much was because the idea of sharing her love and attention with someone else, even for a summer, was just like too much for me to handle. So we're about 1 kilometer away from the house when this latest throwdown between Greg and myself happens. And my mom, who's probably starting to think at this point that I was like switched at birth in the hospital instead of bringing her daughter home, she's been like housing the Antichrist for the past 11 years. She pulls the car over and she stops and she turns around and she looks me right in the eye and she says, "Get out." And I know that seems like a very harsh thing to do, but this was like suburban St. Catharines, and like the worst that would happen was I would get hit by a kid on a scooter. And so I do. I step out of the car, and I have this moment as she slowly pulls away where I'm like, she's totally bluffing. She's bluffing. She's gonna stop the car. She's gonna let me back in. Greg is gonna disappear, and we're all gonna have a good laugh about this. But I then realized that this is my mom, and I don't know how many people here have experience with a small Catholic Polish woman as your mother, but they're basically tiny Mussolinis dressed up as Mary Poppins. So bluffing isn't really in their repertoire. They just do things and they kind of go to confession about it after. So I start walking home, and as I'm walking home, I start planning my revenge in my head, obviously. But I'm 11, and so revenge for an 11-year-old is like, I will not take out the compost this week, so I'm not coming up with any strong ideas. But then the most miraculous thing happens. I reach this point of the road where you either turn left to head down to my house, or you turn right and head into the neighborhood park. And something in my head just clicks, and I think to myself, today I will be avenged. And so I turn right and I head into the neighborhood park instead. And I don't even think about what I'm doing while I'm doing it, but I head straight for the playground. Excuse me. And I climb onto the playground, and I go and I sit in the top of that like covered tunnel slide, and that's it. I sit there and I wait. And you know how like people have been in car accidents describe getting like adrenaline rushes, and they're able to like lift up cars and do crazy superhuman things because of everything coursing in their body? Well, in that same way, I was so wronged that the kid that normally had to like eat and check her Neopets account every 2 hours, developed like the sociopathic personality of Patrick Bateman alongside with the patience of a monk. And so I sat there and I waited for 3 hours. Yeah. And I wish I could stand here in front of you all and be like, that's the moment that my thug life really took off and I never took shit from anyone ever again. But I think that's clearly not the case. See, the extent of my plan was really just to sit there and like make them miss me and feel really bad for having taken my demonic existence for granted. But that was it. And because even maniacal sociopaths get hungry, I realized I eventually had to, pack it up and head home and make what I thought was going to be like a really triumphant return. And so I do. I slide down to the bottom of that slide and I walk out of the park and I start heading home. And I remember thinking to myself, like wondering, like, what's going to happen when I walk in the front door? And I had no idea what to expect. But I was pretty sure it was going to be awesome, and now they were all going to know who's really in charge, and everything was going to be great. What actually ended up happening, though, was I walk in the front door to find my aunt and my mom just sobbing on the living room couch. And it turns out that they had actually gone out looking for me, but because I was in that covered tunnel slide, they hadn't even seen me from the street, and so they thought that the playground was empty. And as they were telling me how worried they were and how scared they had been, I started to feel this triumph in my chest just deflate. And I started to realize how I had, put them through so much more than I had really meant to, and I hurt these people that I really cared about, and I started to realize that maybe being so bold and rebellious isn't all it's cracked up to be. I mean, it's fun to sit in a slide and be like, oh, they really miss me back home. But once you head home and face the consequences of your actions, it feels a lot less like triumph and a lot more like shame. I actually called my mom last week about this story, and I asked her like what she remembered and how it made her feel and like why she didn't disown me that entire summer. And it turns out it's actually kind of a fuzzy memory for her. Like she remembers it happening, of course, and she does remember looking for me and crying, but the details are pretty distant. And it's just funny how this like tremendous act of defiance for myself as a child now is just water under the bridge. And it just made me think how that's how a lot of things in life that we kind of work ourselves up over end up being they're just these like tremendous, earth-shattering things at the time, but give it a month or a couple years or so, and they often end up being just, small specks in the grand scheme of things. I wish I could stand here in front of you all and say that that was the moment that I got rid of my passive-aggressive ways forever. But it would be a lie if I said that I've never sent a text that just says, okay. So I still have a tiny bit of learning to do. But at least you all know, and you're all super prepared, so don't mess with me, or I'll pull some real gangster shit on you and go hide from you in a park for 3 hours. Or more likely, I will apologize for having been in your way. Thank you.